when it comes to hazmat response, speed and accuracy are everything.
You know, I've never seen this show, Clarkson Farm. It's Speed and Power? I'd never even heard of the show.
No, you know what? I've never heard of it either, but we were corrected on Speed and Power, and somebody said, no, that's a Clarkson Farm thing. And I was like, that is so true, because speed and accuracy, that's a 908 thing.
Right, that's the little black box guys, and now they got the red box as well.
And that's why hazmat teams all around the world are trusting the 908 devices. Their handheld 90X, MX90X, I should say it right, and their Explorer are changing the game.
Right, that's one of the very few instruments out there that can read Novichoks.
But not just Novichoks. It can do all sorts of chemical warfare agents, pharmaceutical-based agents, drugs, explosives. And what I love about the 908 is it does it all at trace levels.
And it can identify and quantify over 5,000 gases and vapors in seconds, and that is changing the game.
Yeah, so if you're wondering why hazmat teams all over the world are trusting 908 devices, this is why. Check them out at 908devices.com and upgrade your metering toolbox. Hey, just came back from your lecture at New England Hazmat. It was a huge success. I mean, that was everybody was on their feet clapping for you, Bob. That was unbelievable.
The best, simply the best.
Well, if people didn't make it to New England here in beautiful Massachusetts, where can they see us next?
Well, we have OMRA. Oh, no, we're not going to OMRA. There was a snafu with that thing. We're not going to OMRA, but we are going to Michigan. I'm looking forward to that. Going to see some of our friends from the Industrial Strength Hazmat Harder Show, new podcast that's coming out under our flag. Go check that out. Cold Zone, this is your last chance to go and get the Cold Zone sweepstakes. Go to the website, hazmatguys.com, and search around on it. And if you can't find it, just email me, bob@thehazmatguys.com, because it's a sweepstakes. They're taking care of a lot of different things, admission, hotel, food, everything on the arm. It's silly not to do it, so we're making one more push.
I wasn't hugely in the loop on the sweepstakes thing, and suddenly, like, I'm seeing email after email after email coming in about it. I'm like, what am I doing with it? Is there anything that I have to do with this sweepstakes?
Nope.
But there are a lot of people signing into this, so jump in and get your chance.
So Cold Zone's coming up hot, and then Baltimore, we're planning our shenanigans. If you're going to Baltimore, we have all types of debauchery and shenanigans being planned. So that one's going to be a lot of fun.
Yeah, we were basically given, what do you want us to do? And they're like, whatever you want to do. And we're like, are you sure?
You guys can do whatever you want. Oh, boy, don't say that.
Okay, all right. Looks like we're going streaking.
This is take 2 of this. We had some audio-video issues. We thought it was the Canada versus USA thing. No, I'm totally joking on that. We use a very intricate system to produce this show, and sometimes the bandwidth goes down, and it gives out a result that is not successful. So we have rebuilt the entire show, and here we are back, and happily low resolution, so you don't have to see this.
Actually, I can finally actually see myself for the first time in a while, and I'm ugly. I can't believe you look at that. Jesus, what is wrong with my wife? All right, so
doing radiation.
Yeah, the case studies. Yep, the case studies. So a couple weeks ago, we had put out the episode. We were talking about how radiation, how it's there. It's often, we often train as if it's a high risk, low probability event. And in reality, more than likely, how we're going to come across radiation as is a low risk, low frequency event. Mm-hmm. Which we see as massive repercussions in the training world, where people they let their radiation training slide because maybe in their entire career in their department, their team has had one radiation incident. Yeah, we never do it. And that's just not acceptable, guys. Like even though something doesn't happen that often, and even though it may have a low risk event, meaning it's not going to affect a lot of people, right? If I have a Troxler gauge that got run over by a bulldozer, it's not affecting a lot of people, but we still need to have an understanding of what's going on. So a couple good case studies. I've got our perplexity research up, and I just wanted to start it with this, that in the past 7 days, despite everything that we say, right, in the past 7 days, there have been no new reported missing radioactive sources in the United States. However, a recent incident involving missing radioactive sources in Jersey was solved. On December 2nd, 2024, a shipment containing a small amount of germanium-68, GE68, went missing during transport from a Nazahar Cancer Center in Newfield, New Jersey. The material was later found on December 10th, and it has been properly handled and disposed of. Federal and state agencies confirm that drones were not used in the search for the missing material. So there was, if you're not in like the Northeast area, and actually I think this kind of made national news, there was drone craziness, and a lot of people, including myself, speculated that maybe they're using the drones to look. I don't necessarily think they would tell us either way, but that's a totally different ballgame. Anyway, case study number 1, which is a construction accident involving radioactive material. Guys, in my opinion, this is the type of scenario that we're most likely to see because radiation is used a lot in industry for looking at pipe densities. We were just doing some industrial training over the week, and I can't even remember where I was. I was in Idaho or Illinois or something like that, and I was at a facility, and we were talking about. I said, "How often do you change over the pipes?" And he goes, "Well, actually, some of these pipes have been here for over 60 years. We have a constant team of radiologists. I don't know if they're called radiologists. Can't remember the technical name off the top of my head. But they go and they X-ray and they gamma ray the pipes to make sure the thicknesses are regular. And that's one facility. Like, we have to think this stuff is everywhere. So I have a feeling this is more than likely how you're going to come across radiation. So what happened in this case? A construction worker was severely injured in an accident involving a Troxler moist density gauge. I know a lot of people love that word moist. A moisture gauge, which contains radioactive material, right? That's how it works. It puts a tremendous amount of radiation down into the ground. It kind of sees what comes back up. The worker was struck by an earth grader, leading to severe injuries and a potential radioactive contamination.
Now, the first responders, we had the props out to the Peebles Volunteer Fire Department and the Franklin Park Ambulance Authority. They responded and they identified the presence of radioactive materials. Now, the reason why I think this is kind of important is that I will say the vast majority of volunteer fire departments, or let's say smaller fire departments, don't have the funding to have actually radiological detection capabilities. And radiation is one of those things that if you don't have the detector, you don't know it's there. So the good, nice job that they actually were able to see that there was radioactive, and they called the hazmat team.
Yeah, but despite the potential for the radioactive contamination, the medical team prioritized the patient's critical condition and transported them to the hospital, alerting the hospital to the possibility of the contamination. Now, this goes to show how well training can overcome fear, because if they don't have the equipment to be able to detect it, if they just noticed, hey, this is a radioactive substance, maybe there's contamination, and that fear could have led them to be like, well, we're not going anywhere near here. So even if you are not a technician, say to speak, it's important to have your operation levels guys trained so that they can administer life care. And understand that, hey, like the radiation that we could be contaminated with, or that the person could be contaminated with, that is a much less severe incident than the actual, I don't know, like pitchfork going through the guy's head.
Right. So the hazmat team got there, which is the North Hills response team. Props to you as well. And they got command. They got the area secured. They made sure that they established the exclusion zone, and without being checked for, left that no personnel left in the exclusion zone without being checked for contamination. Now, when they got there, let's talk about what they did. They secured the scene. Right? Very good. I like that. And they established the decon. They assisted in deconning affected individuals and areas to minimize the spread of radioactives, because I'm going to guess that the majority of it was like a dry, not like a wet radioactive. And so it's probably just like, I'm not going to say dusting, but definitely like maybe tape blotting kind of thing, like watching for that.
Yeah, and I imagine knowing Troxler gauges, right, and having been, fairly well trained, I am fairly certain that there was not any kind of contamination spread. But the fact that they had the wherewithal to be like, oh, we need to do everything possible to minimize it in case it is, that is a huge props to this team, which kind of goes along into how the first responders were able to provide that initial medical care while ensuring their own safety in case there was radioactive contamination. They also did a great job of communicating during this whole thing. They disseminated information to the public. They coordinated with other emergency services. I'm sure the hospital probably kind of pooed themselves a little bit, but it sounds like in this case, everything kind of came together and everybody's fine.
Right. So a couple challenges that they had. First was their training, right? As Mike said in the beginning, is that there's not a lot of emphasis on your training. Think about your yearly refresher. How many times do you do the ERG? That's okay, because we do it a lot. How many times do you do like radiation? It's like not a thing, right?
Not that often.
That leads, to more risk during this kind of response.
Sometimes we can take a look at a case study that's gone really, really well, and we often think that, we can only pull out things from case studies that went bad. Like, here's a lesson learned, like, I did this and I messed up. But in some cases, we can look at what they did right and say, holy crap, we need to mimic that. Their effective communication among the different teams, including the radiation specialists, the medical personnel, that went I'm sure there were some issues, but for the most part, overall, it went relatively seamless. And it really should shine a light on how we need to be training and communicating in an interdepartmental, multi-agency facet. And if you're not set up to do that, maybe some of your training and some of your time should be spent trying to, how do I coordinate between different teams, and not just radiation, right? Like, what are all the different aspects in the hazmat world that I need to communicate with different teams?
Hey, take a look around, and how many lithium-ion batteries do you have around you right now?
Ooh, I would say I have about 7 or 8. just right here on the desk.
Yep.
Yeah,
they're everywhere.
They are everywhere.
Fire departments are dealing with these things regularly.
Which is why we are excited to tell you about a new product that is proven to both limit and control battery fire propagation. It's from a brand called DeGeo, and they are chock full of hazmat experts who know that there is a better way for us, the first responder, to be handling, storing, and shipping these at-risk lithium batteries.
This product will solve your lithium-ion battery problems. It's lightweight. It works across all battery types, and we can say that it lives up to the hype because we actually tested it by ourselves.
Yep. ObexionFR is part of a 2-part system with a scientifically designated granulars along with the UN-certified payload drum. More importantly, ObexionFR is proven to reduce the toxic ideally gases that are emitted when a battery kicks off. So all in all, it's keeping your team safe.
To learn more, go to ObexionFR.com. That's OBEXIONFR.com. And speaking of that, you know what I hate?
When your car jack kicks out from under you and crushes your leg?
Yeah, I would hate also my face burning off.
Well, I'll take the leg over the face for sure, but why? What the hell happened that your face is burning off?
Think about radiation, man. We're just doing a whole show on radiation, but not knowing about radiation like that volunteer fire department. That would be a big thing too.
That's true. Good point. Luckily, we've been playing with some new meters from Mirion, and let me tell you, man, they are some top shelf devices.
I'm going to bet a bunch of you guys don't even know who Mirion was, and neither do we until we started talking to them. And wow, there is more than meets the eye with these guys.
Yeah, after we realized how much reach they have in the nuclear, medical, safety, and defense sectors of this country, it's no wonder that they are a multi-billion-dollar company.
And they got amazing gear, the AccuRad, the Spear Ace, the Spear View. It helps you detect and monitor radiation quickly and accurately so we can make good decisions on the fly.
Go check them out because you're going to want their equipment. Mirion.com. That's Mirion.com.
Well, even going with the communication is like the public, right? If you don't communicate the plan, keep them fed, right? Because if you don't feed them the information, they get squirrely, right? So they, again, nailed this part, is that they kept that fear factor down by keeping them informed, and that relieves a lot of the effort and the operational stress and friction. So
I got
Great
a question
job,
for
guys.
you that just kind of popped into my head. Totally not on the page, and I know Bob hates it when I do this. But
No.
question: what do you think? Do you think that department resources, when it comes to communicating with the public, that there needs to be the thought process now of how to combat the people who are going to say that all of this is false information? You know, like there seems to be like a
conspiracy theory people.
Yeah, the conspiracy theory, that's not true, that this is not true. Or do you think our job just ends with giving out the information?
I think it ends because you can't handhold everybody. I would say you do the right thing, and people do people things. But you know,
they do people.
you know, I always said that. I always said that people, you know, a person's smart, but people are dumb. You know, when you get that crowd mentality, they do stupid shit. And a person, an individual, is very smart. Feed the people, feed the person, and the people will do what the people do. I mean,
do we have a responsibility to anticipate reaction of the public to disinformation against what we're saying? Like, should that be part of the thought process at this point? Like, in this world that we live in, we know at least 33% of the people are going to push back on anything you say.
I know that there is now I never taken it myself, but public information officer training deals with that.
They do. I've never taken it either.
I've never taken it, but I've read the curriculum, and I'm pretty sure there's a section on that of dealing with dissenters or something like that.
All right, cool. So that lands in the not our problem category. All right, let's go on to the next one.
Okay, let's see. We have an overview from Hoypaxla, Mexico. This is in December of 2013. And what happened here was that there was a theft of a truck that was carrying cobalt-60, which, if you don't know what that is, that's a teletherapy source used for cancer treatments. And this source was removed from its shielding and abandoned in a field.
Yeah, and it turns out that this was one of those, like, you know, unlucky lottery moments for people who were stealing vehicles. They weren't actually trying to get to the source. They didn't even know the source existed. The truck was stolen on December 2nd, 2013 during an overnight stop at a gas station in someplace in Mexico that I'm not even going to try to pronounce because there's a J and I know it's supposed to be an H and I won't even try. But the driver was forced out and tied up by armed men. The truck was discovered a couple days later in the Hupaxlia, right. Mexico. The Cobalt-60 had already been removed from protective cases and was left in the nearby field. So they clearly weren't after the source.
Now, the Mexican authorities, with the assistance of the federales, the federal police, used a robot to safely recover the source on December 10th. December 10th. That's 8 days post this whole operation going on. I do like the robot because time distance shielding, me not putting a person there, is the ultimate amount of time distance shielding. Good idea, guys.
Yeah, I want to say, like, you know, what took so long, right? The 8 days seems like such a long time, but then I just read that thing in Jersey where it took months to to find the stolen sources. So the federal police, some things that they did right, like, so what in this type of instance, what would be the roles of the first responders? And securing the scene is one of the first and foremost. Now this becomes a little bit difficult, right? Because we've got two scenes that we need to think about when it comes to radiation, because everything is contamination, right? We want to constantly think, could this source be spread? We really have the scene that extends 10 days geographically. I don't know if that makes any sense, but if you think about where this thing could have been in the 10-day mark, that could all be potential contamination. They started off with just the immediate area. The federal police established a secure area around to prevent unauthorized access and to limit potential exposure from that moment forward.
Now, a good thing that they did was they coordinated very nicely with the CNSNS, which is their, I guess that's their, like, regulatory agency, and then the global agency of the IAEA. And through that coordination, they figured out the best plan for the recovery.
Yeah. So public safety aspect right? First responders, they play a critical role in disseminating information and understanding what could potentially be in their area. Obviously, we have contamination, but then when we go beyond contamination, we need to think, well, what happens if somebody is exposed to this? Well, they're going to get radiation sickness, so we should alert hospitals and medical personnel in the area to be on the lookout for potential signs and symptoms of radiation exposure, and that was done.
Yeah. Now, they did have a couple of challenges, we'll say. They were not good in the comms area with the public, right? They had a very slow recovery process, and then they had a lack of clear communication that led to, we'll say, frustration among the local residents who felt that the authorities were not acting fast enough.
Now, from a technical operation point of view, the operation was a little bit muddled by the fact that the cobalt-60 source was unshielded, producing a tremendous amount of radiation, lots of exposure risk, and required some really specialized equipment to take care of.
Yeah. Now, a couple lessons learned on this thing is not that you can prepare for every eventuality, but they had almost no plans for dealing with anything in this even genre, right? I'm talking, you don't have to have every single, contingency plan for every single slice. Just have a slice of the pie.
Yeah, you should have a tab in the notebook that says stolen sources.
Right.
Right,
Yeah.
That should be a category.
They should have defined clear roles, emergency response plans, responsibilities for the agency, who you're going to call, when you're going to call, how you're going to call, those kind of things.
There was some less than effective communication with the public and between agencies themselves, which probably led to this feeling like nobody was doing anything fast enough. And that hindrance played a role in public perception, and it also technically reduced the safety aspects during a radiological incident. You need everybody to be on the same page very quickly. You need to be able to assess things in radiation very quickly. You need to be able to spread out and very quickly find levels of contamination, find exposures, things along those lines. Without communication, that whole thing is just going to fall apart.
Yeah.
So our third and final case study is going to be the Church Rock uranium mill spill. This happened way back, actually, the year that I was born, July of the year I was born, so 1979, in Church Rock, New Mexico. And this involved the failure of a dam at a uranium mill tail disposal pond, which released radioactive waste into the Puerco River.
So here's the dilly. The breach occurred due to a previously identified crack in the dam. So they knew there was a crack, which was not adequately addressed. Then they had warnings of an impending spill were ignored by both the state and the UNC, which is the United Nuclear Corporation. Now, that is not... don't confuse that with the commission, right? The Nuclear Regulatory Commission,
right. This
NRC.
is a private agency.
This is a private agency. So I just don't want to. I don't want to throw some shade towards. I'm trying to use these hip terms the kids say, but I don't know.
Well, I think that would be there's no cap. It wasn't a government agency.
Don't be salty.
If I'm using the language right, I think no cap is the proper terminology. I'll ask my 10-year-old.
Cap equals lie. Today. I know that.
Yes, right. So no lie.
We should do a whole show on just conversions of language.
Well, I think that might be hit at our Southernmost Hazmat conference, not to just randomly interject anything like that, but I was having a conversation with an instructor that impressed Bob so much that he was like, we need to get this guy. That doesn't happen that often. And it was all about the gender stuff. So I'm hoping that I don't schedule my own thing when these guys are having their talk, because I really want to take this class. All right, back to the case study. I get thrown off so easily. Damn ADD. All right. Geological issues were the reason that the dam broke. It just happened to be built upon bad ground, which I say this because so often we talk about radiation as being nefarious acts. This wasn't an act of nefarious in any way, shape, or form. This was one of those like shit happens moments.
Right. So there was a couple of things that popped out. I don't want to say lessons learned, but the consequences of what happened. The spill released 1,100 tons of solid radioactive waste and about 93 million gallons of acidic radioactive tailing solution into the Puerco River. And though all immediate environmental effects were significant, the natural processes like the alkaline soils or helped neutralize the acid, and the dilution by the clean sediment mitigated a little bit of the effects over time.
Now, there was no immediate acute health effects to the public, but of course, concerns remain about the long-term health exposures during chronic exposures of radiation. So you get this stuff spilt out in the river, nobody's immediately like their face is burning off, but they are turning around going, well, if I let my kids play in this river as they grow up, is there going to be issues like disease? Is there going to be kidney disease? Is there going to be cancer later on in their life?
Right, and that downstream effects of radioactivity, like this spill contaminated water sources, right? The water sources are drank by livestock or even wild animals, and that food chain eventually makes it up to us, and even local agriculture, right? So residents lost access to clean water. The Navajo Nation, they are sovereign kind of nations within the nation, spent significant resources on the clean water supplies.
Right. Which, if you've ever had wild turkey, it's seasoned with uranium. It's delicious. Best foie gras you could ever have. How did they end up cleaning this? They responded to this to the New Mexico Environmental Improvement Division. Sorry, I can't speak today. They initiated stream monitoring and they ordered the cessation of the tailing discharge. Cleanup efforts involved containing the spill of the effluent and collecting contaminated materials.
Now, they also had to do some long-term monitoring. Like they said, hey, listen, keep monitoring this stuff because you're going to have some long-term impacts, and they wanted to make sure that the land and the water was safe along the Paraca River.
Now, one of the things you hope that you are never involved is an incident that ends up changing regulatory framework. But if you were involved in this incident, that's exactly what happened. The spill was eventually handled by New Mexico under the Uranium Mill Tailing Radiation Control Act. So they got a whole new legislation around this. The Nuclear Regulatory Commission later became involved. They ended up completely suspending the United Nuclear's operation license until they could get their act together.
Right. That's the federal agency saying no to the United Nuclear Company.
Right.
Morte, right. So, and they had some legal settlements, like United Nuclear, the company, made an out-of-court settlement, which means they were going to get smashed. If you settle out of court, you're gonna get screwed with the Navajo Nation. And the site was placed on the EPA's national priorities list in 1983. That indicates significant environmental contamination.
Yes, 1983, which means it's still probably contaminated and nobody's touched it.